Hold on to your reality, because what you're about to see will shatter everything you thought you knew about our place in the universe. For decades, governments around the world have denied their existence, but the truth can no longer be suppressed. Brace yourself for an unprecedented look into the world of extraterrestrial encounters, as classified footage and documents are finally brought to light. These chilling sightings, captured by military personnel and civilian observers alike, unveil a reality far beyond our wildest imaginations.
This experiment took place in the 1950s, and it was one of those mind control research projects that was sponsored by the CIA. This was actually just one experiment that was a part of Project MKUltra. So basically they wanted to study the effects of LSD, but instead of finding willing participants, which, let's be honest, probably wouldn't have been that difficult, instead they used non-consenting people who were lured to safe houses by sex workers who were being paid by the CIA, and then once at these safe houses they were slipped the drug and monitored from behind a one-way glass. For over a decade, the project gave the government more knowledge about the drug itself and what it does to the mind. It gave the knowledge about surveillance technology and even sexual blackmail. In the end, the project was shut down in 1965, but people don't forget, and the damage was already done. In our number 9 spot today, we have Operation Wash Tub. This operation came to light in 2014 when documents became declassified and more people could learn about this Cold War era operation. Basically, this was a covert mission that had its sights set on Alaska. The plan detailed the training of different people who lived in Alaska. Like, we're talking just ordinary residents. They wanted to train these people to both code and decode, and a few other different spying tactics, which would have been so cool. I mean, I would have wanted to be picked so badly. Not that I would have even known it was happening, but you get what I mean. Basically, the plan was put in place in case the Soviet Union was to invade Alaska. Then these unsuspecting ordinary citizens would use their newly learned espionage techniques to get all the intel they could and secretly relay that information to high-ranking US officials. As we now know, of course, this invasion never occurred, so the contingency plan wasn't needed, but there were 89 lucky temporary agents who were trained just for this purpose, and I have never been more jealous in my entire life. In our number 8 spot today, we have Project Minaret. This is a document that became declassified in 2013 as a part of the National Security Archive's efforts. This historical document describes a sort of watch list of prominent Americans who were critical of the Vietnam War. The document explains that their overseas communications were tapped and listened into by the government from 1967 to 1973, and a quote from the document reads, quote, "President Johnson wanted to know if the domestic anti-war movement was receiving help from abroad." The project expanded so much that it went on to include more than 1,600 people, including civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Whitney Young, and Muhammad Ali. There were also people like Democratic US Senator Frank Church of Idaho, Republican Senator Howard Baker of Tennessee, a New York Times columnist, and a Washington Post columnist. The surveillance began under President Johnson, but it continued on through to the Nixon administration. In the end, the only reason it was stopped was because Attorney General Elliot Richardson was concerned about its very doubtful and murky legality and decided that during the Watergate scandal that it probably would just be best to shut it down. I mean, they definitely had enough on their plate already at the time. In our number 7 spot today, we have Project Iceworm. This secret mission took place in the 1960s, and it was basically intended to build a series of mobile nuclear missile launch sites under the Greenland ice sheet, because this would then house medium-range missiles close enough that they would be able to strike targets within the Soviet Union. This project was called Project Iceworm, but there was another project called Camp Century. Basically, Camp Century was to test out Project Iceworm and see how likely it would be and how feasible it would be. So engineers went to work and created a network of underground tunnels and buildings that included places to stay, kitchen, a hall for hanging out, there were supply rooms, and even a communication center and a nuclear power plant. This was all kept as a super secret for a long time and was even kept from the Danish government for 7 years. In 1966, however, the project was cancelled because of the shifting ice. This created unstable conditions for the underground tunnels that are most likely crushed now, but still remain beneath the Arctic. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Pentagon crash. We have all heard about the devastating September 11th, 2001 attacks, but some of you might not know that on the day, there were actually 4 separate coordinated attacks, all a part part of the same plan, and one of those attacks was on the Pentagon. There was a photo that was previously classified but eventually has been released by the US government, and it shows the absolute devastation that was done by the commercial plane that crashed into the Pentagon. The plane was able to tear through all 5 rings that existed in the building. All of the people on board the plane that day, as well as 125 people that were in the building at the time, passed away in this horrible event. For obvious reasons, the initial photos of the Pentagon damage were withheld from the public or from circulating in the media, but now that they have been released, it just shows us all another side to that horrible, terrifying day. In our number 5 spot today, we have the UFO report. This photo is of a previously classified document from 1963. Although the document still has a lot of information that has been blacked out, the document is the description and report of an unidentified flying object or UFO encounter. This is said to have taken place over the desert of Nevada, and the report was written in detail in order to have a written record of the event. This document is said to be the authentic report from the FBI, which is exactly why some of the details have still been omitted, despite it being declassified. This might seem like less of a big deal now, as in this day and age we have declassified video footage of similar kinds of encounters, but for 1963 this was huge. As discussions of alien or extraterrestrial life is a big part of our modern society, this document shows that these things have been on our minds for many years now. In our number 4 spot today, we have Project 1794. This project was created with the goal to build a sort of saucer-type aircraft that would be designed to shoot down Soviet bombers. The program, which was created in the 1950s, was quite ambitious and had some pretty lofty goals. A team of engineers began trying to build a disc-shaped aircraft, but here's the real kicker. They wanted it to be capable of traveling at supersonic speeds at high altitudes. The documents about this project show that they wanted it to be able to travel at Mach 4, which is 4 times the speed of sound, and they wanted it to be able to reach an altitude of over 100,000 feet. At the time, the project was estimated to cost about $3 million, which is about $26 million today. In the end, the project was cancelled in 1961 because the craft failed tests and proved to be aerodynamically unstable, which of course would provide a whole slew of problems at high speeds, especially supersonic ones. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Manned Orbiting Laboratory. So for this one, this is a mission that was created in response to a Soviet Union secret mission called Almaz. Basically, this program, called the Manned Orbiting Laboratory, was run by the Air Force and the intelligence community's National Reconnaissance Office, and the goal of it was to spy on and throw the Soviet Union off track in space. Some of the documents in this mission have now been declassified, and according to them, one of the goals was to knock some of Moscow's satellites out of orbit or to fire projectiles at them. They even wanted to try and capture one of the Soviet satellites in space and then basically send it back down to Earth so that they could study it. That's so wild. And because of this, Moscow equipped their secret space station with a rapid-fire cannon in order to stop any of this from happening. I seriously feel like I'm watching some sort of space action movie right now. I can't believe that these are real things that happened and they were created in the 60s and 70s. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Lunik kidnapping. Don't worry, Lunik is not a person and instead is a Soviet lunar satellite that was kidnapped just for one night. This project honestly sounds like it was taken straight from a movie, and it has to do with the Great Space Race. In the early 1960s, the Soviet Union wanted to make it as clear as possible that they were winning the race to space, so they launched a multinational exhibition of their Lunik satellites, which became the first spacecraft to impact the moon's surface, and when the Luna 3 returned, it brought with it the first ever pictures of the moon's far side. It was a big deal, and it's safe to say that the US wanted to know everything that they could about it. Of course, the satellite was heavily guarded, but it was traveling from city to city for this exhibition, so undercover CIA agents went to work. Basically, they convinced the man who drove the transport truck to get some rest at a nearby hotel, and basically they would look after it for him while he rested. I'm sure it was a bit more complicated than this, but you get the gist. From here, the agents then took apart and photographed every single component of the thing before putting it back together and placing it back in the truck for its next tour date. There is no indication that before the operation became declassified that anyone outside of those involved knew what had happened that day, and I'm not gonna lie, that's a pretty hilarious plan, and the fact that it worked is both shocking and pretty impressive. In our number 1 spot today, we have Operation Paperclip. This operation began in 1946 when the President of the United States at the time, Harry Truman, authorized it. Basically, the entire point of it was to lure scientists from Nazi Germany over to the United States after the Second World War. This was done in an effort to aid the country in their post-war efforts, as well as to ensure that the valuable knowledge these people had would not end up in the hands of perhaps the Soviet Union or either side of the divided East and West Germany. Had it not been classified information at the time, this would have of course been highly controversial, as many of these people were involved in, and sometimes even leaders of that hateful party. Former President Truman stood by his decision, saying that because of the relations with the Soviet Union, quote, this had to be done and was done. Several of the scientists a part of this program were later investigated because of their former ties, but one was only ever tried out of the over 1,600. None of the paperclip scientists were ever found guilty for any crimes either in the United States or in Germany. Perhaps the most famous of all of the paperclip scientists was Wernher von Braun, played a huge role in advancing NASA's Apollo missions.
This is a mysterious one to me. Robin Coulomb was an astronaut in training at NASA and was in a special 2-year program. He outbeat 18,300 applicants and had many years of schooling and expertise to do so. So hence the reason it was such a shock for the world to learn that he just quit after a little more than a year. According to a NASA spokesperson, it was for personal reasons. Look, I've seen the movies. More than likely, knowing that NASA doesn't have a high turnover rate, Robin more than likely did not quit NASA for personal reasons. We need to get the internet detectives on this case. Did he find out a secret that disturbed him so much that he had to quit? Did he discover that they are really keeping aliens at Area 51? Who knows? My vote is for the latter. Coming up at our number 9 spot, we have Mayday. Not specifically NASA, but an interesting story to note from another very awesome astronaut. You may not know this, but South Korea had its very first astronaut go to space in 2008, and it was a very big deal for them. Astronaut Yi So-yin was South Korea's first and only astronaut to quit her job, but for, in my opinion, a very good reason. While on her journey home from space, she was going to find out that it would be far from smooth. She discovered that she was veering off course, which, as you can imagine, was completely scary, even though spaceships tend to be slightly off course most of the time. But in any case, they did land safely. Hooray, but they landed 260 miles off course near some shepherds in Kazakhstan. The people of the village thought that they were aliens. Even though she made history, she eventually ended up quitting and decided to go back to school in California. Imagine going out into space and then coming home and deciding to do something else. Damn, that's a life lived. In our number 8 spot, we have black holes. Black holes are fascinating. If you haven't heard of a black hole before, well, just know that they are some of the strangest and most fascinating objects in space. They're, quote, extremely dense with such a strong gravitational attraction that not even light can escape their grasp. Apparently, the Milky Way could contain over 100 million black holes, and that was where one of the first black holes was discovered in 1964. It was called Cygnus X1. NASA and Space.com have reported that, quote, astronomers saw the first signs of the black hole when a sounding rocket detected celestial sources of X-rays. In 1971, astronomers determined that the X-rays were coming from a bright blue star orbiting a strange dark object. It was suggested that the detected X-rays were a result of stellar material being stripped away from the bright star and gobbled up by the dark object, an all-consuming black hole. Yeah, that's not terrifying. I would probs quit after learning about this. In our number 7 spot, we have aliens. There has been an increasing amount of aerial phenomena, as NASA puts it, otherwise known as UFOs, in the last while, and so NASA has actually announced the assemblage of a team of scientists that will be examining this phenomena. Hooray! NASA said the focus will be on identifying available data, which is the best way to gather future data, and how it can use this information to advance scientific understanding of the issue. The chief of NASA's science unit, Thomas Zurbuchen, has said, quote, we're looking at the Earth in new ways, and we're also looking the other way, at the sky, in new ways. What we're really trying to do here is start an investigation without an outcome in mind. Well, at least they finally admit to aliens possibly existing, and all the conspiracy theorists of the world can say to the people that downplayed all of the evidence, told ya. In our number 6 spot we have space music. This is allegedly from the Apollo 10 mission to space. The astronauts were checking out various equipment to see what would work in space. Of course, the stakes were high because they were actually in space, and who knows if the equipment might blow up or whatnot. But apparently, when they put on headphones connected to a speaker they were testing, they heard a strange whistling sound. They were so amused and a little unsettled by this strange music that they later called it space music. In our number 5 spot we have the space fire. Apparently, astronaut Jerry Leininger, who was stationed on the Mir space station, was just having his dinner when suddenly he discovered an extra tank of oxygen-based chemicals catch fire. Leininger said, quote, "It was a hot fire burning out of control." Apparently the fire was blocking one of the Soyuz ships that the team would have had to board in order to evacuate, so had they not put the fire out, somebody would have been left behind. Yikes, well that's a little unsettling. Thankfully, they did. In our number 4 spot we have the floating animal corpses. The thought of this is literally horrific, as I am obsessed with animals and refuse to kill even an ant, but hearing this isn't that surprising, as apparently the first living things sent to space were a monkey and a dog. Those poor babies probably had no idea what was happening until they eventually starved to death, which is just sad. Anyways, hearing this shouldn't then surprise you to hear that the corpse of the dog and monkey can be seen floating in space. Imagine seeing that and then having to go on doing what you're doing. God. My heart hurts. Yeah, if it wasn't already obvious that I'll never be an astronaut, well, I definitely won't be one now, knowing that I may have to stumble across this. In our number 3 spot we have shiny objects. This story is slightly unsettling, but also kind of makes you excited for future astronaut discoveries. Apparently one of NASA's astronauts by the name of Alan Bean has claimed that he saw a really shiny object on the moon. When he was asked to describe it, he said that it looked like shoe leather. You usually would assume that anything from outer space is gray or black, so to hear that there's something shiny just hanging out on the moon is so interesting. It reminds me of that kid's book where that one fish was really sparkly, the rainbow fish. Loved that book. They were never able to learn anything more, but could this be the moon's version of a diamond? Probably. In our number 2 spot we have they're watching us. Allegedly, when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon in 1969, it is said that NASA lost transmission for about 2 minutes. Apparently during those 2 minutes, there was a secret message to NASA that said, "Those babies were huge, sir. Enormous. Oh God, you won't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecrafts out here lined up on the far side of the crater's edge. They're on the moon watching us." Whoa. Okay, well, I am now a believer in the fact that I'm sure they did not lose transmission, and I'm sure NASA only said that so that the general employees and people watching could not hear what needed to be said. Finally, in our number 1 spot we have a fleet of UFOs. Apparently astronaut Gordon Cooper witnessed the most crazy thing in human history, in my opinion. Proof that our future could potentially be Star Wars in real life. He saw a fleet of UFOs. That's right. He claims to have seen it around the time he flew the Air Force. What's wild is that about 10 years later, he'd bear witness to another UFO. Also the luckiest man in history. Allegedly in 1963, a UFO flew towards him. Apparently it was picked up on a radar too, which confirms the proof of existence and Gordon's story. Whoa. Fun fact, I once saw a floating light in the sky, and then I saw it literally zoom away at lightning speed, not lying, so I'm pretty sure I also have seen a UFO.
Project Grudge Report 13. Okay, I've read quite a few different UFO sighting stories and stories of alleged alien abductions, and this is fully one of the most terrifying I've ever heard of. So basically, the story starts off in March of 1956 when Jonathan P. Lovett was assisting Major William Cunningham in the White Sands Missile Testing Grounds near Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. The pair were out searching for debris from a recent rocket test when Major Cunningham heard a loud scream. His first thought was that Sergeant Lovett had been bitten by a snake, so he went around to help aid his partner, and this is when he allegedly saw something that he never expected. He recounted seeing the sergeant being dragged away by some sort of long serpentine arm that had wrapped around his legs. Whatever this creature was, it was connected to a hovering disc that was in the air about 15 feet away. The major stood there in horror as he watched this creature and the sergeant retreat into the craft, which then rose vertically into the sky. Of course, he radioed for help, and while he was taken to the hospital for observation after this, search teams were sent out immediately. It wouldn't happen until 3 days later that they would find the body of Sergeant Lovett only 10 miles away from the site where he was said to have disappeared from. The autopsy performed on him later also only raised more questions than answers, as his body was severely harmed. So of course there was an investigation that happened, and many people claim that this investigation was detailed in a 600-page document labeled Project Grudge Report 13. But the problem with this is that no official information on Report 13 exists, and the US government denies its very existence at all. Though Grudge Reports 1 through 12 have been declassified along with Report 14, no official mention or accounting of Report 13 exists, and the story solely relies on secondhand accounts of this horrible incident. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Air Force disappearance. On the night of November 23, 1953, near the Canadian-US border, the United States Air Defense Command noticed a blip on their radar where there shouldn't have been one. This was showing that there was some sort of unidentified object that was in restricted airspace over Lake Superior. In response to this, an F-89C Scorpion jet was sent to investigate with 2 crew members. First Lieutenant Felix Moncla was piloting the craft, while Second Lieutenant Robert Wilson was observing the radar. Once in the air, the pair had trouble tracking the object, which kept changing its course, which then led to ground control helping to direct them. The jet pursued the unknown object for 30 minutes as it closed in on it at 500 miles per hour. After a while, the 2 blips on the radar, one being the unknown object and the other being the investigating jet, converged into one point, and then suddenly the radar return from the F-89 simply disappeared from ground control's radar scope. Shortly after this, the radar blip that was from the unidentified object also veered off and then vanished. The men who were sent to investigate in the jet never returned from the mission, and there was never any wreckage found signifying an accident despite extensive searches. The men and the jet just disappeared completely. It is said that the explanations for the disappearance that have been released throughout the years have changed and flip-flopped in what they say happened, so at this point, no one has any idea what really went on here. In our number 8 spot today, we have Dr. Brian O'Leary. Dr. Brian O'Leary is a former NASA astronaut and Princeton physics professor, and he has been quoted as saying that there is abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that civilizations have been monitoring us for a very long time, and that their appearance is bizarre from any type of traditional materialistic Western point of view. Apparently, he also said that these visitors use the technologies of consciousness, they use droids, they use co-rotating magnetic discs for their propulsion systems, which seems to be the common denominator of the UFO phenomenon. I obviously have no idea how I could possibly substantiate these claims, but they certainly are interesting, regardless of what you personally believe. And based on his education and work experience, it really is quite compelling. This could, of course, just be nonsense in order to stir up the masses, but it could also be someone who's finally telling us all the truth, but we're just too skeptical to believe it. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Roswell incident. This whole rigmarole started in 1947 when some sort of crash took place near a ranch in Roswell, New Mexico. Shortly after this, the Roswell Army Airfield released a statement saying that they had recovered a flying disc from the ranch, but the Army quickly retracted the statement and said that it wasn't that, but instead it was just a conventional weather balloon. This was a little sketchy, but most people let it slide until the 1970s. What happened in the 70s is that a retired lieutenant colonel began to speak out. In an interview with a UFO researcher, he said that the weather balloon story was a cover-up and that alien remains were actually recovered from the crash site. There were both first and second-hand witnesses who claimed that not only were there at least one, but possibly more alien spacecrafts that had crashed at the scene, that there there were also extraterrestrial remains that were recovered by the military, who then began to engage in a cover-up. In 1994, the story changed from a weather balloon to a nuclear test surveillance balloon from Project Mogul, and it was stated that the stories of the alien bodies were probably just test dummies that had been dropped from high altitudes. I'm not gonna lie, the whole thing sounds a little sketchy. I obviously wasn't there, so I can't say for certain what happened, but someone is definitely lying. I'm just not sure who. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Stephenville UFO. In January of 2008, in the small town of Stephenville, Texas, a bunch of residents all saw something in the sky that they couldn't believe. In the beginning, it appeared to be white lights in the sky that were first in a single arc, but then they quickly moved to form 2 parallel lines. It was estimated that the lights were spanning about a mile long and half of a mile wide, but the craziest part is that it was flying at 3,000 miles per hour, which is similar to the speed of a fighter jet, but there was no sound reported at all. The government chalked this sighting up to a US Air Force flight operation, but many of the residents who saw this event on that day were absolutely not convinced and truly felt like they were lied to. Some even explained that what they saw was too technologically advanced for the human civilization. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Rendlesham Forest incident. This incident is often referred to as Britain's Roswell incident, and it took place in December of 1980. The incident took place in the Rendlesham Forest, which is a pine forest in England that, at the time, sat in between 2 United States Air Force bases, RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge. Over several nights around this time of year, actually, a number of credible military personnel reported strange and colorful lights both above as well as in the forest. Some of those who were sent to investigate the strange lights reported seeing a triangular craft at close range, and there was even a famous audio tape made of the encounter. After these happenings, the UK Ministry of Defence claimed that the incident posed no threat to national security, and because of that, it was never investigated further. What really happened in the forest all those years ago remains a total mystery, but those who actually witnessed the lights and the aircraft are said to have remained totally baffled. In our number 4 spot today, we have the unexplained UFO. In 2017, after the existence of the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program became more well known, a video was released of an encounter between an FA-18 Super Hornet and some sort of unidentified flying object. There weren't a ton of details released about exactly what happened during this encounter, but using the Raytheon Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared Pod, they were able to capture an extremely fast-moving white oval that was around 45 feet long. The oval had no wings, and it didn't appear to have any kind of exhaust either. They were tracking the UFO at an altitude of 25,000 feet just above the Atlantic Ocean, and then they were shocked as the craft rotated on its axis and flew away. There was no explanation released with the footage because it truly is unbelievable and currently unexplainable. In our number 3 spot today, we have the USS Princeton UFO. This UFO sighting comes from 2004. On November 14th of that year, the USS Princeton noticed an unknown aircraft of some sort that was about 100 miles off of the coast of San Diego. For 2 weeks prior to this crew had been tracking a strange flying object that would start out at around 80,000 feet before extremely quickly dropping to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. Black Aces Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate of Strike Fighter Squadron 41 went over in 2 fighter jets in order to kind of scope out the situation, and when they arrived, they saw what at first appeared to be churning water while there was just an oval shape just below the surface. After this, a white oval-shaped object appeared above the water, but it had no markings on it at all. Like, no windows, nothing that would indicate an engine, no wings, and the infrared monitors on the jet didn't pick up any sort of exhaust. The commander and lieutenant commander tried to intercept this strange aircraft, but it very quickly flew away and reappeared on the monitor 60 miles away. Like, when I say quickly, I mean it was moving at 3 times the speed of sound and over twice the speed of fighter jets. So faster than any kind of technology we currently have. We still don't know what exactly this was, but sure, a lot of us are thinking the same thing. In our number 2 spot today, we have the cigar-shaped UFO. Let's set the stage. It's 2:45 a.m. on July 24th, 1948, and there are 20 passengers aboard a twin-engine propeller plane that is at 5,000 feet being flown from Houston to Atlanta by pilot Clarence S. Childs and co-pilot John B. Whitted. Out of the 20 passengers on board, 19 of them are asleep at these early morning hours, and everything seems to be going as per usual until it wasn't. The 2 pilots and the 1 passenger who were awake all witnessed the same thing about 20 miles southwest of Montgomery, Alabama. About a week after the incident, the pilot explained what he had seen by saying, quote, "It was clear there were no wings present, that it was powered by some jet or other type of power, shooting flames from the rear some 50 feet. There were 2 rows of windows which indicated an upper and a lower deck, and from inside these windows a very bright light was glowing. Underneath the ship there was a blue glow of light. By his estimates, he watched the UFO for about 10 seconds before it completely vanished." The co-pilot gave a similar explanation and also added, quote, "The object was cigar-shaped and seemed to be about 100 feet in length." He continues on, quote, "I asked Captain Childs what we had just witnessed, and he said that he didn't know." While this is obviously very strange and peculiar, what has driven UFO enthusiasts even more is the fact that this strange sighting was of course later investigated by the US government, but the results of that investigation have allegedly been mostly destroyed. Does that mean maybe they found something they aren't willing to share yet? Some people believe that perhaps the pilots and passenger witnessed a secret Soviet spy craft, others believe it was definitely something of the extraterrestrial variety. In our number 1 spot today we have the New Jersey UFO. This UFO sighting took place in 2001 just above the New Jersey Turnpike. On July 14th, 2001, just after midnight for around 15 minutes, motorists driving down this highway stopped to stare at the sky to witness what no one could believe. There were strange orange and yellow lights in a V formation just above the Arthur Kill waterway. There were a ton of witnesses who were all extremely confused and shocked as to what they were seeing. Air traffic controllers initially denied that there were any flying objects that could have caused the mysterious lights, but a group that is called the New York Strange Phenomena Investigators claimed that they received radar data that night that would corroborate the story that the witnesses were telling. It may not have been aliens, but it certainly was some sort of unidentified flying object that no one had ever seen before, and there were people from all walks of life witnessing it together.
What you just saw was a declassified footage that has recently been released by the Department of Defense. US Navy pilots encountered an unidentified flying object flying just over the sea. The footage you just saw was captured on a Raytheon at-flare pod, which is a very expensive device that has multi-sensors on it, and it can track and capture things in the distance at very high speeds. The Department of Defense has declined to comment on this video, but the agency did confirm to the media that the US government had run a program for investigating reports of UFOs. They weren't sure if this could maybe be a threat. Maybe they thought Earth was being attacked. Maybe the aliens was just scoping out Earth, to just see if they can invade. Pretty freaky, so let's move on. What you're about to see next is very terrifying. An alien invasion is up next at number 9. The footage I'm about to show you guys was filmed in 2015 in Egypt by an Egyptian student. Alright, so let's actually see what people had to say about this video that was posted on YouTube. First up we have Robin Carolo 0628 fake. Next up we have Mark B says, "It's too perfect, therefore it's fake." Squad YT says, "Sorry, that was my frisbee. I threw it so long and now I lost my frisbee. Solid work, especially out of zoom. OMG. Alright, well let me show you guys this video slow down a bit and zoom in on it. Alright, so we've had enough of that. Let's move on. Let's move on to number 8. This next legend comes from Kenneth Arnold, who believes he saw an alien UFO on June 24th, 1947. Just remember this year to the end of the video, 1947, because there was another sighting just a month after this date. Kenneth Arnold was a private pilot when he saw 9 unidentified flying objects, and they flew past Mount Rainier, which is located in Washington. Kenneth estimated these flying objects going at a minimum speed of 1,200 miles an hour, which is around 1,932 kilometers an hour. This is much faster than commercial planes we have today. But remember, this is 1947. This was during World War II, which was in the 40s. The fastest plane was the Supermarine Spitfire. So it for sure wasn't a plane made by man, because we never made planes that can go that fast in the 40s, which only leaves us to believe that these flying objects were not from Earth. The question is, where did they come from? Now that's a scary question. I'm not sure if I want want to know. The Alderney alien sighting back in 2007 that was spotted by 2 different people come in at number 7. This one's pretty freaky. Okay, so we all know people can make up stories all the time, right? Well, what is the chances of 2 different pilots seeing a UFO at 2 different times and they didn't even know the other person have seen it? Okay, let me explain. Captain Ray Bauer was flying a routine passenger flight for the civilian airliner Allegheny Air Services when he and his passengers saw 2 UFOs in the distance. Ray Bauer was afraid at first to report what he saw because this can actually ruin his career. Okay, imagine this. This pilot says he's seen a UFO. You don't want that guy flying your plane, do you? Another pilot who didn't even know that someone else saw another spacecraft in the air made the same report. Alright, moving on to number 6.
Scientists from all over the world are trying to figure out what caused a mysterious blue light to spiral in the sky over Norway on Wednesday.
A strange blue light was seen in the Norwegian skies back in 2009. People were freaking out about this, and many had conspiracy theories on what it could be. Experts believe that this light was actually a failed missile launched by Russia's military, but a lot of people don't believe that. They believe that this is an alien cover-up. I don't know, what do you guys believe? And I didn't even ask you guys, do you even believe in aliens? Are there UFOs? Okay, moving on to number 5. For scary alien urban legends, back in 2010, there was an unidentified flying object that was spotted above an airport in China. The airport was actually closed down due to the sighting. Everyone was actually freaking out. Okay, if I saw this in the air, I would also be freaking out. I mean, what is that? Google captured a UFO on camera, and this shockingly comes into number 4.
Jacksonville, Texas, and go to the street view, then pan around, and there it is. A thing that I don't know what...
I actually know what it is. It's obviously an alien spacecraft, and it's coming for people in Jacksonville, Texas. Let's see what other people think it is.
What is it? I don't know what it is. Look at it. Now what is that? A car in the sky?
I looked up...
Okay, what the heck did that woman just say? Okay, is this real life right now? What is going on in Texas? Okay, let's not ask any more questions because I don't think we're gonna have the answer for this one, so let's move on. Next up on our list, at number 3, let me take you guys over to India for this one, where this image was seen by people and it actually went viral all over the news. This video is actually insane and I don't know what that thing is. This might actually be the most plausible encounter to alien life. I'm not kidding. It's massive and the most prominent that we've ever seen. It's the most prominent for sure on our list. India has actually been known for UFO sightings. Recorded sightings go back to like 1951, where 25 people in New Delhi saw a UFO hovering over them, and then they all said that it just suddenly vanished. At number 2, we have this insane footage that was actually just captured maybe about 5 months ago. And we actually know what this is, so... So yeah, so this took place in Southern California, and everyone was fearing that an alien invasion was happening. For many people, the end of the world was actually happening at that moment. Well, it ended up just being a rocket that SpaceX launched as part of their tests that they've been performing. I'm not sure if they told the public. People were freaking out. Well, many people believe that it was a rocket. Well, to this day, people believe that yeah, it was a rocket by SpaceX, but some people actually believe that SpaceX and the media is just lying to try to cover up this alien encounter. What do you guys think? Do you guys have any alien encounters? Let me know in the comment section below. If not, just make something up. And I'll try to read your guys' stories on a live show, so go wild down there. Finally, at number 1, let me take you guys back to 1947, where an alien made international headline news. Back on July 8th, 1947, the Army Air Forces announced that an alien spacecraft was found. that was reported by ABC News. It was probably reported on a TV that looks something like this, or on a radio that looks like this. I don't even know what that is. After that was reported, there were many conspiracy theories surrounding what people thought to be an alien spacecraft. People thought the spacecraft had extraterrestrial beings inside, and the military knew about it, and they just covered it up.
Organic object. Leland Melvin is an American engineer and retired NASA astronaut who served on board the Space Shuttle Atlantis as a mission specialist. He is an incredibly brilliant man with an incredible resume and possibly has one of the best NASA photos of all time, but it's his expertise and intelligence that really makes this story so unnerving. He claimed that while on a space mission as he was orbiting Earth, which is definitely the coolest beginning for a spooky tale, but also really sets the stage for a multitude of horrifying things that could be about to happen. While he was on this mission, he said he saw a quote alien-like organic object. NASA disputed his claims and said that what he saw was just ice, but I feel like I trust the person who actually saw it with their own eyes. Leland went on to write that whatever he saw was quote translucent, curved, organic looking. I have no explanations to offer, but I will say it certainly is interesting and kind of terrifying, and it only adds more horror to the story when you realize that they tried to cover it up. In our number 9 spot today we have Levelland. This incident took place in 1957 in Levelland, Texas, and actually was the inspiration for a scene in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In the real-life incident, dozens of citizens from across the city began individually reporting seeing a rocket or strange set of lights or some sort of unidentified object, but that wasn't it. Whatever these citizens were seeing was also reportedly interfering with their vehicles as well. Engines were suddenly just dying out and lights were cutting out. If this happened just 1 or 2 times, this could have been some kind of a really strange coincidence, but it was way too many instances. Something else had to have been at play. The authorities at first thought that the reports were a hoax until they too saw the strange lights as they began to investigate. This is where Project Blue Book came in to also investigate, and they came up with quite the conclusion. They claimed that whatever had happened here was simply just a case of an electrical storm and ball lightning that caused the lights in the mechanical malfunctions. That's super reasonable, but the catch with this explanation is that there were no reported thunderstorms in the area that night at all. I'm just saying, something here clearly isn't adding up quite right. In our number 8 spot today we have the lone survivor. This is an unexplained signal that was first detected in 2003 when astronomers were using a massive telescope in order to re-examine 200 different areas of the sky. I say re-examine because these were areas where there was once a signal that was detected coming from them, and they were taking a look back to see if they could detect the same signal again. During this re-examination, they found all of the signals had disappeared except for one. This signal didn't only stick around, but it actually got stronger. This signal is coming from between the constellations of Pisces and Aries, and the curious thing about this location is that it resides in a place where there are known obvious planets or stars. To make things a little more mysterious, there are scientists who believe that the frequency this signal is in is the frequency alien life would be most likely to use if they were trying to contact us. I have no idea what leads them to that theory, but it felt too interesting to exclude. While there are other possibilities of what these signals are or where they're coming from, it's quite an interesting piece of information and is something that definitely deserves more looking into. In our number 7 spot today we have the space snake. Dr. Franklin Story Musgrave is an American physician and retired NASA astronaut, and considering how credible he tends to be, despite the absurdities of this story, it makes it hard to pass off as a lie so easily. While he was in space, he claims that he saw something that I don't wish upon anyone, a sort of space snake. He said that he saw an 8-foot-long white snake floating through space. I don't even know what I would do. Probably cry? Probably call Houston? I'm not sure. There are many people who think that this was simply just a detached hose from the spaceship, but Dr. Musgrave remains adamant on what he saw, and to be completely honest, I believe him. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. I mean, I don't know what happens in space, but I do find it really hard to believe that this person, who would likely be really familiar with the parts of a spacecraft, mistook a hose for a snake. Also, how would they not notice an 8-foot-long hose missing? Again, I'm certainly no astronaut or scientist or engineer, but it all just seems very strange. In our number 6 spot today, we have the classified report. We are just barely getting into 2023, but already there are some crazy announcements, including one regarding a report that was delivered to Congress from the Director of National Intelligence. Basically, since August of last year, there's been a total of 510 unidentified aerial phenomenon observed in protected airspace or near sensitive facilities. According to the report, 26 of these were described as drones, 163 were labeled as balloons or balloon-like entities, and 6 were described as clutter, whatever that means. This is all fine and well, but the concern sets in when we consider that this leaves 171 sightings unaccounted for, some of which appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. It's also important to note that the majority of these sightings are coming directly from Navy and Air Force pilots. Here's the thing, what we know as the public is only a 12-page declassified summary of the actual, real, secret report that was delivered to Congress. Only time will tell if we ever find out what the rest of the report includes or what will happen with further investigation into the 171 sightings, but hopefully if answers do arise, one day we'll find out. And hey, maybe if they don't, maybe Anonymous will just hack them. And then we'll find out. In our number 5 spot today, we have the lights. Leroy Chiao was the commander of the ISS in 2005, and this is exactly when this strange sighting occurred. It is said that he wasn't the only one who witnessed this, however, as it is said that the entire crew was there to see this really unexplainable occurrence along with him. Basically, it is said that they saw a strange set of lights while up in space. He went out to describe the lights and said that they were in the formation of an upside-down V, and that they ended up just stumbling upon this bizarre situation as the formation flew past them. I'm just gonna say it. I mean, I think it's aliens. I just don't have any other possible explanations, and you're telling me that the whole crew saw it? Not just one person this time, all of them. I swear, nothing will convince me of aliens more than an astronaut's first-hand account. Cause like, it's hard for aliens to come and visit us here on Earth, but like, they're just flying through space? They're like, yeah man, this is what we do too, just on the highway. Okay, sorry, I'm going a little crazy. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Lubbock incident. On August 25th, 1951 in Lubbock, Texas, a group of scientists from Texas Technical College were all hanging out in the backyard of geology professor Dr. W.I. Robinson. They were all chilling, enjoying each other's company, until around 9:20 p.m. when they saw something strange. It was a V-shaped formation of 15 to 30 bluish-green lights passing overhead. They were completely confused over what it could be, but figured that the lights would likely reappear, which they did. About an hour later, the lights reappeared, and at this point, all of these scientists knew that they had witnessed something exceptionally interesting. But what was it? The scientists weren't the only one to witness the lights either. About 350 miles away in Albuquerque, New Mexico, an employee of the Atomic Energy Commission's top secret Sandia Corporation, who had a high-level Q security clearance, had been sitting outside with his wife, quote, gazing at the night sky, commenting on how beautiful it was, when both of them were startled at the sight of a huge airplane flying swiftly and silently over their home. On the aft edge of the wings, there were 6 to 8 pairs of soft, glowing bluish lights. There were more sightings as well, all reporting a similar thing. The group of scientists began investigating, tracking the lights, which they had witnessed 12 more times. They measured the angle of the flights, they tracked the speed, and they attempted, unsuccessfully, to try and measure the UFO's altitude. Here's the deal with this though, the government did end up investigating, but the official explanation for these lights is the most cryptic message I've ever seen. It read, quote, I thought that the professor's lights might have been some kind of birds reflecting the light from mercury vapor streetlights, but I was wrong. They weren't birds. They weren't refracted light, but they weren't spaceships. The lights that the professors saw have been positively identified as a very commonplace and easily explainable natural phenomena. I can't divulge exactly the way the answer was found because it is an interesting story of how a scientist set up complete instrumentation to track down the lights. Telling the story would lead to his identity, and in exchange for his story, I promised the man complete anonymity. Despite people claiming that this mystery has been solved, by this explanation, people are left with a lot more questions than answers. You know? It's just some natural phenomena. We're not gonna tell you which one though. In our number 3 spot today we have glowing green. Gordon Cooper is a well-known astronaut after having flown the Mercury 9 and the Gemini 5, and in fact he was the last American to spend time in space alone. But despite all of these exciting accolades, I want to take you back to May 15th, 1963. Here he was sent off into space in a Mercury capsule for a 22-orbit journey around the Earth, and while on this journey he saw something extremely unsettling, a glowing green object that would approach his capsule. During his final orbit he did tell the tracking station of this object that was quickly approaching his capsule, and they were able to pick up this UFO on their radar, but once Cooper landed, reporters were told that he was not allowed to answer questions regarding this UFO. It's even more interesting considering how Gordon has been a very vocal and firm believer in UFOs, so I have to ask, what do you think this was? In our number 2 spot today we have the Shag Harbor incident. This UFO encounter is often referred to as Canada's Roswell, so I was shocked that I hadn't heard of it before. Basically, this incident took place on October 4th, 1967, when an unknown object crashed into the water near Shag Harbor, which is a tiny town in Nova Scotia. There were at least 11 people who witnessed this object as it crashed, and many people claim to have heard a whistling sound followed by a loud bang when the crash took place. The witnesses that claimed to have seen the UFO were all doing a bunch of different things at the time. One couple was just sitting on their porch, but 2 witnesses that really get me are a flight pilot and a ship captain. On Air Canada Flight 305, First Officer Robert Ralph pointed out to Captain Pierre Charbonneau that there was something strange out the left side of the aircraft. They reported an object tracking along at a parallel course a few miles away and described it as a brilliantly lit rectangular object with a string of smaller lights trailing the object. Shortly after they first noticed it, there was a large but silent explosion near the unknown object, and then 2 minutes later there was a second explosion, but this one faded to a blue cloud. As for the ship captain, Captain Leo Howard Mercy saw 4 blips on the decorator that were totally stationary. This led to him looking up to the sky, and this is when he saw 4 bright objects sitting in a rectangular formation about 28 kilometers from the vessel's window. He wasn't even the only one who saw it on board. The entire crew of nearly 20 fishermen stood on deck and watched. A man named Laurie Wickens was another one of the witnesses, and he and some friends ended up calling the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because they saw a huge object floating in the Atlantic Ocean about 1,000 feet offshore. This is all super weird, and not only the RCMP, but also the Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal Canadian Air Force became involved in the investigation, but nothing was ever recovered or found. But it was also revealed that all commercial, private, and military aircrafts along the eastern seaboard were accounted for. So what could all of these witnesses have seen? Since they never officially identified what it was, in the official Government of Canada documents it is listed as a UFO. In our number 1 spot today we have the 2021 UFO. On February 21st of 2021, a blogger was using a radio scanner to try and pick up the feed from an aircraft when he received much more than he ever expected. He intercepted the transmission of the wrong aircraft, but at the right time. As an American Airlines flight was headed from Cincinnati to Phoenix around 1:19 p.m., the pilot came on the radio to ask the question, "Do you have any targets up here? We just had something go right over top of us." After this, he followed up with, quote, "I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast right over top of us." Not only were FAA air traffic controllers not able to see any object in the area on their radar scope, but they still have been unable to identify exactly what it could have been. This does happen more often than any of us really know, and it is possible that the object could have been a part of some covert military or navy operation, but it certainly raises some alarm bells that it was unable to be tracked in any sort of capacity. I wonder if this is one of these stories that will remain a mystery, or if one day we'll get some sort of answers as to what exactly happened here. This piece of controversial evidence came from Mars and was announced in 1996. NASA scientists announced that they had potentially found what appeared may be fossilized microbes in a lump of Martian rock. It is likely that this rock came off during some sort of Mars collision and just casually floated around the solar system for 15 million years before landing in Antarctica in 1984. Just casual space stuff. After analyzing the rock, it was revealed that it contained organic molecules and small specks of mineral magnetite, which is sometimes found in the bacteria on Earth. Upon further analysis with an electron microscope, it was claimed that there were signs of nanobacteria. Since then, some claim that the magnetite wasn't that similar to those found in bacteria, and there is belief that the signs of the nanobacteria could have been grown in a lab. In our number 9 spot today, we have Oumuamua. A few years ago, scientists all agreed that we had found an object that was flying through our solar system, and they called it Oumuamua, and it was widely agreed that it was an interstellar comet that had swung out from around another star. Upon closer examination, however, they realized that something was propelling it, causing it to accelerate, and this is when the debate started, because they just don't really know why. Avi Loeb, who's a Harvard University astrophysicist, proposed the idea that rather than a comet, this could be an alien probe that is being pushed by a light sail, which is a very wide but extremely thin piece of material that accelerates by being pushed by solar radiation. Other scientists didn't agree with this and instead said that it's possible that hydrogen ice could have melted off of the object in a way that would mimic a rocket engine or something of that nature. Avi then wrote in a study that hydrogen ice is too easily heated and it would have melted off long before it reached our solar system. I guess we really just have to wait it out while the scientists debate and gather more evidence to really know what was going on behind this one. In our number 8 spot today, we have cyanobacteria. For around 2 decades, Dr. Richard Hoover has been studying meteorites that were found in Antarctica, and in 2011 he claimed that he and his team had found evidence of ancient bacteria from colonies that thrived on comets, moons, and other planets. The astrobiologist said that they were able to make this discovery through the use of the most advanced microscanning technology in the entire world. Dr. Hoover sliced open these meteorites and discovered what they call the remains of cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae. Different type of algae though. This type of algae is said to have a unique ability and quality to thrive even in some of the harshest conditions, which is necessary when talking about surviving the extreme environment some other planets hold, as well as just space in general, alright? It's not very kind. Dr. Hoover said that while some of the bacteria he had found was similar to those on Earth, some of the others were completely alien. He said, quote, "Neither I nor the experts who have seen the evidence have any idea what these creatures might be. I believe these findings indicate that life is not restricted to Earth, but is broadly distributed even outside of our solar system." In our number 7 spot today, we have the new material. Of course, when meteorites show up to Earth, people are dying to get their hands on them to study them and see what all they contain. We get some pretty incredible deliveries of things that arrive on meteorites, and analysis has been able to identify about 300 minerals in different space debris that comes down to Earth, and 40 of those are ones that have only been found in meteorites. But this is all very cool and interesting, but one of the most fascinating is the Allende meteorite. This is one that exploded over Mexico in 1969, and after analyzing samples from it in 2012, scientists announced the discovery of a material that had never been seen on Earth, and that frankly, no one even knew was possible to make. It was called penguinite, and it consists of quite a strange variety of elements including titanium, zirconium, and scandium. In our number 6 spot today, we have stardust. Just a few years ago, researchers in Australia made a startling discovery. Ancient grains that were discovered inside of a meteorite that had landed inside of the country were studied, and it was revealed that they were actually grains of stardust. Okay, I know this is Australia, not America, but what am I to do, alright? Stardust? I can't leave that out. This dust was formed somewhere around 5 to 7 billion years ago, and it is now the oldest solid material ever found on Earth. These kind of pre-solar grains are a very rare find. In fact, they're so rare that they're only found in about 5% of meteorites that have fallen to Earth. This is a fascinating discovery because having something like this really is the next best thing aside from having the actual star itself, and it gives insight into our universe billions of years ago. In our number 5 spot today, we have the radiation-proof bacteria. In 2002, Russian astrobiologists hypothesized that a bacteria here on Earth may have actually evolved on Mars. Deinococcus radiodurans is the most tough bacteria on Earth. It can withstand even the most extreme conditions, such as cold, dehydration, vacuum, and acid, but the craziest part is that it is virtually radiation-proof. These little microbes can withstand several thousand times the amount of radiation a human can withstand, as well as more radiation than any other bacteria on Earth. You can even find this bacteria on the inside of a nuclear reactor. Like, that's how radiation resistant it is. Scientists did an experiment to see how quickly this bacteria could build up a stronger radiation resistance by zapping the bacteria with enough radiation to kill 99.9% of it, then leaving the remaining 0.01% to repopulate before zapping it again and just repeating the process. It was concluded that it would have taken E. coli thousands and thousands of rounds to build up the same resistance that this hardy bacteria did in only 44 rounds. With this experiment, and based on the dose of radiation they gave each bacteria, it would take millions and millions of years to get even close to the amount of radiation they gave the bacteria in one cycle. Since Earth just doesn't carry that amount of radiation, it has led some scientists to speculate that since Mars is virtually unprotected and receives extremely high amounts of radiation, that these bacteria may have evolved on Mars and gained their resistance in just a few 100,000 years, and then they may have been flung off of Mars by an asteroid and then brought to Earth on meteorites. It certainly is just a hypothesis at this point, but really, how else can we explain this random, superpowered bacteria that is unlike anything else on our Earth? In our number 4 spot today, we have the USO. UFO to USO. Daryl Miklos is an explorer who took a deep dive following maps that had been put together by his friend and former astronaut Gordon Cooper. The map Daryl was using was initially made to help identify more than 100 magnetic anomalies in the sea. During one dive at a location within the Bermuda Triangle, you know, where everything just goes weird, he thought he was going to find an ancient shipwreck, but instead found something that continues to stump researchers and Daryl himself. He came across a very strange structure that wasn't like anything he had ever seen before. The structure had long obtrusions which stuck out from the side, and the whole thing was covered in coral, so whatever it is, it has been down there for hundreds if not thousands of years. Daryl has said, quote, "There's identical formations in 3 different areas, and they don't look nature-made, they don't look man-made, certainly nothing I've ever seen based on my experience, and I have years of experience at doing this. We've identified multiple different types of shipwreck material. This doesn't match or look anything like that." People have started speculating that this structure may just be the remains of a crashed UFO. If it isn't that, then what else could it be? In our number 3 spot today, we have energetic cosmic rays. Energetic cosmic rays are described as high energy protons and atomic nuclei that move through space at nearly the speed of light. There are some that originate from supernova, but there are some that originate from outside of our galaxy, and those ones have scientists wondering where they are coming from and what the source of them is. As these cosmic rays flow into our solar system, their paths are bent by the magnetic fields of both the sun and the Earth. Upon impact with Earth's atmosphere, these rays produce a shower of secondary particles. Some of these particles do end up reaching Earth, but most are intercepted by either the magnetosphere or the heliosphere. The strongest cosmic rays are extremely powerful, and they can have energies over 100 million times greater than a man-made collider. If you're wondering why you should care about this space mystery, it's because these things have the power to cause our digital systems to crash, and in our ever-increasing digital world, that could cause some major disruptions to life. That is why we care about how many of their origins remain a complete mystery that has scientists stumped. And also, because shouldn't we know just where these things that are bombarding Earth's atmosphere are coming from? Concerning is definitely the word I'd use, but honestly, what part of space isn't concerning? In our number 2 spot today, we have the UK meteorite. On February 28th, 2021, reports came pouring in from across the UK of an unusual streak of light that was seen in the sky. These reports were far behind the UK's Fireball Alliance though, as their cameras had already picked up the signal and they were already in the midst of estimating its landing site. That's right, this streak of light was a meteor. It's a remnant of our early solar system that has been flying through space at unbelievable speeds until it came down through our atmosphere and ended its long, awesome journey scattered in a bunch of pieces across rural Gloucestershire. Teams were sent out to be responsible for the recovery of the extraterrestrial material, which was found in a family's driveway, as well as in a sheep's field nearby. This meteorite is a rare specimen known as primitive carbonaceous chondrite, which is said to contain materials that have been essentially unaltered since the formation of the solar system 4.5 billion years ago. The pieces of this meteorite can give us insights into the building blocks of the planet, planets, and it could potentially give us clues as to how the Earth came to be, this wonderful planet that possesses all of the resources necessary to sustain human life. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the ancient sightings. This evidence comes from long before any of us were alive, but that doesn't mean it isn't potentially important. There have of course been recent UFO sightings and sometimes even reported alien visits or abductions. But with pop culture and the media and social media, it's easy for us to write these off as hoaxes, or people who are just trying to receive their 5 minutes of fame, or people who thought that they saw something but were mistaken by another piece of human technology. But what about the people who claimed these kinds of sightings long before the internet or international news or even human-made flying objects existed? In our history, even our ancient history, there have been writings and paintings of the potentially extraterrestrial variety. As one example, the 15th century painting The Madonna with St. Giovanni depicts the Virgin Mary, but also in the background features some sort of hovering disc-like object that looks a lot like a UFO. This isn't the only example, however, as we've also seen some otherworldly beings in ancient cave paintings and Sanskrit scrolls, and there are some people who swear it is also written in the Book of Ezekiel. It certainly says something that potential alien sightings have existed since so far back in our human history, so it must either point to proof of alien existence or just humans being obsessed with conspiracies right from the beginning.